So who was the first person to come up with the idea of Europe? Hecataeus of Miletus was definitely one of the first. The ancient Greeks were the first to use the word Europe. And what Hecataeus saw as Europe was a geographical region distinct from Asia and Africa, which they called Libya. 1,000 years later, the Frankish scholar Alcuin of York used Europa. He used this term to describe Christian civilization, an identity that was rooted particularly in its relation to Charlemagne's empire. So is Europe tied to geography or religion? I live in Brussels, and Brussels is definitely Europe. I think we can all agree there. But what makes Brussels Europe? Is it geography or is it religion? Brussels is about 50% Christian. So by the argument of Alcuin of York, only half of Brussels is European. The other half, the non-Christians, the atheists, the agnostics, the Muslims, they're not European. And geographically, Brussels is definitely not Africa, but is it not Asia? That may sound stupid, but where does Europe start and Asia end? Europe is not a separate landmass. It's the western peninsula of the Eurasian tectonic plate, which it shares entirely with Asia. So here is Tbilisi, Georgia, 3,200 kilometers away from Brussels, which is also Europe. Well, here's Tel Aviv, Israel, also 3,200 kilometers away from Brussels, which is not Europe? Well, it's in Eurovision, and it's in the UAFA, and maybe closer, quote unquote, to the heart of Europe than Tbilisi. So I guess that one's up for debate. Algeria is only 1,800 kilometers away from me, and Ethiopia, more than 5,000 kilometers away, is majority Christian. So based on geography or religion, are either Europe? Probably not, no. You would all probably say no. But why? Can you explain why? Let's go back and look to the north of Israel, Lebanon. This is a funky one. It is just as Christian as Brussels is here. It was majority Christian for most of the 20th century, and it's also closer to Brussels than Georgia. But nobody here would argue that Lebanon is Europe. So when bombs are dropped 2,000 kilometers away in Ukraine, that is a European issue. But when we're watching the same thing unfold in Lebanon, it's not a European issue, despite it just being 200 kilometers away from Cyprus. I think you get the point. Europe is whatever we want Europe to be. All political ideals and regions are concepts. But in the case of Europe, nowhere else is this more true. Europe is based on a land that has always been geographically connected to Africa, is the same tectonic plate as Asia, and then send people to colonize the Americas. If Europe wants to understand its identity, if it wants to find its footing in this new global era, it is time Europe put the fantasy aside and realize Europe is of the world. Global issues are European issues. And for Europe to learn what it means to be European, it must develop a grand strategy, which means coming to terms with the fact it is not an isolated continent. It is part of a complicated family with war all around. Europe didn't become the Europe we all love because it turned inward. It became Europe by being a crossroads for everything. Greek philosophy, Arab mathematics, African trade routes, Levantine religion. The idea of Europe as a fortress, separate from the world, is a supremacist wet dream that led to the downfall of Europe, and it also led to America's rise. Because as Europe declined, as a result of this dream, the US filled its place, becoming the place where the world could interact, and Europe a place where people could go to visit the past. But this doesn't have to be the case. It's time for Europe to return to the world and once again embark on the future.